It had long been evening outside, but the light from one of the windows of the student dormitory illuminated the dark street. Frantically clutching his cell phone in his hands, Michael could not believe that he had just received a message from his girlfriend with information about the end of their relationship. He made his last attempts to establish communication, typing message after message, and talking about how good they would be together. But this did not change the girl's decision, and in the end, Michael saw that she had blocked his contact. Noticing Michael's strange behavior, his roommates asked if he was okay, to which the young man replied something not entirely intelligible. But a moment later, Michael suddenly hit the table with his fist as hard as he could. And without saying a word, he stood up and quickly left the room, dropping his chair and half-eaten Chinese noodles, and his neighbors already realized that their friend had been abandoned once again. Where this time, it was one of the beauties of the institute, Veronica, who broke off relations with Michael. Meanwhile, Michael had already managed to reach the place where they intended to meet and discuss everything before the girl sent him a message about the breakup, where he was still lucky to meet the dazzling Veronica. Remembering the joyful beginning of their relationship, the young man holding out a bag of goodies began to persuade the girl not to end it, claiming that he was ready to change. If something doesn't suit her about him. But the merciless girl did not leave him a chance, saying that they did not hold any grudge against Michael, but simply realized that her ex-boyfriend needed more and wanted to get along with him. Such a statement greatly hurt the young man, who would have been ready to accept his imperfection, but could not believe that he had given in to another, and not the best option, who had already managed to deceive Veronica several times in the past. At this time, a luxury expensive car pulled up to the side of the road. The side window on the passenger side rolled down, and the man sitting behind the wheel smugly invited the girl to sit in the cabin. Veronica did not keep her waiting, and finally told Michael that it was better for them not to meet again, and not communicate at all. After these words, the girl got into the car and the car quickly sped off, taking with it the last hopes of the young man, and leaving him completely alone on the streets of the night city. After thinking for a few minutes, Michael threw away the goodies he had bought for Veronica, and walked away. He walked around the city at night for a long time, and finally decided to go to the supermarket. Washing down his grief with mineral water, the young man thought about why girls generally don't appreciate the sincerity of guys. He didn't know where to take out his anger, and squeezed the empty bottle with all his might. Rage and anger literally overwhelmed his entire being, and Michael decided that he would no longer behave politely, and follow the girl's lead, but would make them run after him, and then something happened. Some voice from outside first said that the connection to the master system was completed, then a transparent screen appeared before the young man's eyes, on which his name was written. Information about the absence of enhancements was contained, and the account balance was listed as $90 billion. Shocked by what was happening, the young man tried to touch the screen, and at the same moment heard an indignant female voice calling him a pervert, and pointing out the need to watch his hands. Michael, who had not yet come to his senses, tried to figure out what was happening around him. And finally, he saw the dissatisfied face of the girl, who was now saying that the young man was not all right in his head. And the voiceover announced the name and age of this girl, and also announced that her relationship to Michael was minus 50 points. Until now, Michael, unaware of anything, simply stood there, his mouth open in surprise. And the voice continued, saying that he needs to spend money on girls, and as soon as the girl's attitude rating towards Michael reaches plus 96 points, she will become his fan. From what he heard, the young man experienced an even greater shock, and could not believe that just like that he was given 90 billion and told to spend it. And meanwhile, the voice asked the question whether to launch the game, warning that this money can only be spent on girls. But after the unknown person said that the master would get back a tenth of what he spent on the girls, and that additional skills would appear, the young man's answer was already predictable, where he immediately set his first goal. Putting on his most good-natured face, Michael told the girl not to be angry for his behavior, and in order to compensate for her bad mood, he was ready to buy whatever she wanted. While the girl listened to Michael's words, a voiceover announced the successful activation of the game, and said that the reward for completing the action would also be gain points, which can be spent on improving one's strength, dexterity, and spirit. Having heard the cherished words about shopping, the girl did not really believe that such a nondescript guy had at least some means, but she stated this, just in case, with caution and a touch of humor. Michael examined the slender body of Angelica, who was listed at the institute as the first beauty of the art department. And without hesitation, he answered that the girl should just try to ask, and not throw around words out of ignorance. After these words, the girl said that she wanted to treat all the students of her faculty, and therefore she needed financial help. She thought to herself that this beggar was simply trying not to disgrace himself in the eyes of others, and she needed to disgrace him. But before she had time to finish her thought, she received a notification on her phone that $1,000 had been transferred to her account. This forced Angelica to voice the amount, which attracted the attention of supermarket visitors. While Michael stood there and thought that $1,000 was not such a big amount. The pleasantly surprised girl concluded that she had come across a real rich man. Such a fat wallet definitely could not be missed, and Angelica had already formed an action plan. Turning Michael's phone towards her, she quickly added herself to him as a friend on the social network with quick movements of her fingers. And then almost getting close to the face of Michael, who had not yet gotten used to his new role. The girl said that she wanted to take a walk with him to the same place, where she would see how long he would last. The evening city lived its own vibrant nightlife. Heading to one of the most expensive boutiques, Angelica said that she was not a materialistic girl at all, but wanted to understand how serious the young man was towards her. And Michael only thought that the more money she spent, the greater his own winnings would be. So the words about seriousness and commercialism did not really bother him. Michael said out loud that he was ready to do anything for Angelica, and she could choose any things without denying herself anything. They were already inside the boutique when the newly rich man, looking at women's handbags, suddenly heard a very familiar voice behind him. It was Veronica who, standing in front of her old new boyfriend, tried on a new handbag. Michael looked carefully at the face of the one who just a couple of hours ago exchanged him for another and abandoned him in the middle of a dark street. Michael loved this girl, and notes of true sadness now crept into his soul. Noticing the young man's attention towards the other girl, Angelica quickly reminded herself, saying that now was probably not the time since his ex was here. To which the young man replied that this could not interfere with them at all, and the girl could calmly continue to choose things for herself. Satisfied with the successful circumstances, Angelica turned to the consultant with a question about the availability of a fashionable handbag for sale, which was the subject of everyone's attention at the spring show of new models. To which the consultant responded positively, saying that the last such handbag was now being tried on by another girl, pointing in Veronica's direction. At that moment, Veronica noticed Michael and, thinking that he was continuing to pursue her, decided to teach him a lesson, disgracing him in front of everyone in the store for being a beggar. Turning to her boyfriend, whose name was Mason, she asked if he remembered that she would have a birthday soon. To which Mason noted with surprise that the girl celebrated her birthday quite recently. To which the resourceful Veronica stated that then there was a holiday according to the lunar calendar, and now she will celebrate her birthday according to the solar one. Mason, who found himself in a hopeless situation, began to say that he did not like materialistic girls, and asked if Veronica was with him now for the sake of money. This statement took the girl by surprise, and she could not find what to answer. At that moment, Angelica approached her from behind and carefully took the purse in her hand. Taking advantage of the girl's confusion, Angelica took her purse with a light and agile movement. And Michael, without wasting any time, paid for the purchase at that very moment. And while the satisfied girl was enjoying the new thing, the voiceover announced 3 times that she was adding plus 20 points to the girl's position. Michael also beamed with happiness, having immediately received plus 60 points just for buying some kind of handbag, and deciding that at this rate, it would not be difficult to achieve the desired result. At the same time, he mentally noted that his personal financial benefit from the transactions could have been greater. Looking at the homely-looking rich man in the face of Michael, the store consultants recalled the words of the director that one should not be biased towards people based only on their appearance. And Veronica, who had lost her purse, stood with her eyes lowered to the floor. Angelica, on the contrary, was happy, noting that both the purse and the guy with the money were now taken by a better owner than Veronica. She looked in fascination at the simple guy looking at the handbags, and again came to the idea that this jackpot should not be missed. Approaching Michael, she gently grabbed his hand and began to thank him for his generosity, calling him dear, which the young man did not expect, and was a little embarrassed. Veronica looked at this whole scene with tears in her eyes. Saying that this young man's behavior had crossed all boundaries, Veronica pushed Michael away and rushed out of the store. But he mentally noted that this was just the beginning. At that moment, a familiar voice announced that Veronica is the second object, and currently her attitude towards the master is -10. Listening to this, Michael watched as Mason took off from his seat. And he ran after the girl, rushing away from the boutique, where none of the participants in the action heard how Michael was promised a reward of 20 game points when Veronica's attitude towards the owner reaches 96 points. And Angelica, who did not miss her chance, clung to the young man, asking where they would go now. To which Michael, who had a taste of the game, replied that only where he could spend money, since he would never believe that one handbag would be enough for a girl. In one boutique, Michael pointed out the most expensive dress. In the other, for the most elegant and incredibly expensive jewelry. And everywhere he invariably paid with the very card that appeared to him after he agreed to participate in the game. Being in some kind of positive state of shock, Angelica, of course, did not hear how the voiceover announced that her disposition towards the master had improved by another 5 points. Buying new expensive perfume, and another 5 points are added to your favor. Then the cosmetics department, and again, 5 points added to Angelica's location. Numerous clothing boutiques also invariably added favorability points. Finally, the girl herself said that she's probably had enough this time, because all this simply won't fit into her small apartment. To which Michael simply replied that this was not a problem, since he would immediately buy the girl a new spacious apartment. However, the girl suddenly said that this would somehow be too much, because this was their first meeting where she just wanted to joke. And Michael was immediately announced that the girl's favor had dropped by -5 points. This forced the young man to be distracted from searching for an apartment, where he came to the conclusion that the application to purchase an apartment was indeed unnecessary, and only frightened the girl. He quickly found himself approaching Angelica and naming her full details. The department where she studies, her favorite color, zodiac sign, favorite food and favorite movie, which left her completely confused. Then he said that he was very passionate about her, which made him behave so recklessly. Having finished his speech, he turned to the store consultant and asked to open an account in Angelica's name, where he would deposit $50,000, and asked to offer her only the best the next time she visited the store. And again, he turned to Angelica, saying that in this way, he hoped to make amends to her for his bad joke about buying an apartment. Blushing from everything that happened for 1 minute, the girl stood unable to say anything. And Michael, who continued to play his role, came close to her and whispered in her ear that if the girl was embarrassed by his gifts, then she could offer him something in return. This had the desired effect, and the girl finally came to life, pushing the young man away and jokingly calling him a pervert, which prompted the announcement that plus 30 points had been added to the girl's favor. Michael, not noticing the admiring glances of the consultants, literally ready to throw themselves on his neck, concluded that if you are rich, then you will get away with anything. And Angelica suddenly asked why the young man shouldn't think about himself after he bought her so many gifts, to which Michael simply and without a twinge of conscience replied that he did not have money to buy things for himself. The dazzling Angelica gently took the young man by the hand, and saying that now it was her turn to give gifts, pulled the young man along with her, looking at him with an alluring gaze. First, the girl took him to boutiques with men's clothing, and then they started doing the young man's hair. And so after all these manipulations, a completely different person appeared on the street. Angelica enthusiastically noted how attractive this young man really is, and Michael himself said that he now feels somehow strange and not very confident. To which Angelica, approaching the young man, said in a gentle voice, and with no less gentle movements, that there was nothing strange, and they made a very beautiful couple. But then she let go of his hand and began to move away. Throwing a goodbye kiss, the girl said that they would see each other later, and that she was so happy today that she almost decided that she had fallen in love. And Michael was told that according to the results of today's meeting at Angelica, her disposition had become plus 68 points. There were fewer and fewer illuminated windows in the dorm. Opening the door to the room, Michael entered shining like a new scent, whose appearance made his neighbors surprised. When asked what he was doing all this time, Michael replied that he went on a date with Angelica. To which his neighbors began vying with each other to be indignant that he had not yet decided anything with Veronica, but was already dating Angelica, who moreover was the first beauty of her faculty. Then one of the guys approached Michael and said that Angelica was not a girl on his level, where the young man did not have enough finances for her, and was immediately awarded gratitude from Michael for his friendly advice. After listening to his friend, the young man began to read new messages, where Veronica wrote that she chose Mason only because her mother was now sick, and she really needed money, and without hesitation, he transferred her $10,000. At the same moment, in the women's building of the dormitory, an exclamation of surprise sounded so loud that it was heard far beyond the dormitory. That was the surprise of Veronica, who stated that as soon as she mentioned the money, Michael immediately transferred the required amount. Her friend asked if this was the same Michael with whom Veronica broke up, to which the latter answered positively, and added that she needed to get rid of Mason, who couldn't even buy her a bag and take Michael into circulation. She began quickly typing one message after another on her cell phone. She asked where the young man got so much money, what kind of relationship he had with Angelica, and whether he still had any feelings for her, for Veronica. Meanwhile, Michael, having heard the announcement that a +5 had been added to Veronica's disposition, began to think that Angelica turned out to be not as selfish as Veronica. Deciding not to answer the girl for now, the young man began to look for places where he could still spend money on girls. And so he found what he needed, an online broadcast of one famous blogger, Miranda, who accepted financial assistance for herself. Michael's joy knew no bounds, because he found himself in the right place to spend a lot of money, which he did not hesitate to do. Having seen the transfer from a user under the name Lone Wolf, Miranda, not yet familiarizing herself with the amount, sent him words and a token of gratitude. But when the amount was shown on the screen, not only the blogger girl was shocked, but also everyone who was now watching her online broadcast. The comments from the audience were not long in coming, noting the appearance of a rich man here and asking him to give him some money. But instead of responding to these meaningless comments, Michael decided that it would be nice to make another translation and press the appropriate button on the screen of his mobile phone. Meanwhile, in the office of the online broadcasting company, where Miranda worked, a real commotion began. The project manager literally flew into the boss's office without knocking, and with a wild expression on his face, shouted that some rich man had just transferred $1 million to Miranda. The boss's reaction was not long in coming, where he suggested that this was either fraud or money laundering. Meanwhile, other girls who also conducted online broadcasts from this company vied with each other to try to write to the Lone Wolf, telling each other how this rich man had just transferred $1 million to Miranda. Miranda herself could not believe that she had just received a transfer of $1 million. The director did not hesitate to appear, who with signs indicated the boss's instructions to take this rich viewer into circulation. But Miranda stated that she could not talk about it, since she herself would not let such a goldfish go anywhere. After blowing a kiss, the girl told the Lone Wolf to send her a private message so that she could receive her well-deserved gratitude. But the Lone Wolf did not respond to either this or any of the following messages, because Michael had long since fallen into a sound, healthy sleep. A new clear and warm day arrived, and the first rays of the sun illuminated the walls of the men's dormitory. Having woken up, Michael lazily read the correspondence in the general chat about how a certain rich man had appeared in online broadcasts yesterday. And while the young man was washing his face and brushing his teeth, he noted that his transfers yesterday had no effect on Miranda. Because there was no notification about adding her to the system, nor about the accrual of favor points. He was just thinking that probably, in order for the system to recognize a new girl, a personal meeting was needed when he discovered a huge number of messages from various girls who offered to meet him. However, almost immediately he noticed the commotion his comrades were making as they left the room and asked what had happened. To which they explained to him that they were rushing to an open lesson in order to have time to take the best seats, which would allow them to fully enjoy Jessica's beauty. She was an incredibly beautiful girl whom literally all the guys at school dreamed of. And Michael also remembered this girl in great detail, the location of which all the university guys dreamed of. After all, Jessica was famous as a very educated and cultured girl, developing literally in all areas. She was the chairman of the Students' Association. Her musical talent for playing the piano left no one indifferent. Jessica did not lag behind in more dynamic sports, where she diligently studied ballet and became a state champion in fencing. While Michael was turning over in his head all the merits of this university beauty, he was noticed by students sitting nearby, who assumed that he had transferred from another group, since they had not seen him here before. But the young man didn't care about them. He was thinking about how to establish contact with Jessica, who constantly keeps only in her own company. And for 3 years, no one has managed to even just talk to her. And then Veronica and her neighbor noticed him, where the neighbor whose name was Inga noted that Michael had dressed up well, which was probably intended to please Veronica. And at the same moment, it was announced that plus 10 points had been added to Veronica's disposition. Glancing sideways in the direction where the girl was, Michael noted to himself that Veronica was really some kind of superficial woman, since her position improved only because he had dressed up a little. But throwing away unnecessary thoughts, the young man tried to focus on how he could meet and add Jessica to the system, from which he was distracted by loud exclamations from the left side of the audience. It was one of the guys who suffers from excessive self-confidence and arrogance, who loudly declared that he was about to get Jessica's phone number. Jessica's attention was also attracted by such statements, which made her very surprised. But she didn't even have time to say a word when a self-confident guy, whose name was Greg, was already nearby and invited the girl to get to know each other better and exchange contacts. But his unceremonious actions only confused Jessica herself, but her roommate who was nearby was not very pleased with this behavior of the young man. Greg, without wasting any time, moved closer and closer to Jessica, saying that they would be a good couple and they should start dating. But suddenly, with a sharp movement, someone's hand pulled the guy away from the girl. It was Jessica's roommate, Kate, who raised her hand over the guy's head, accompanying her actions with the words that he should not dare to come close to her friend. Watching the sharp end of the pen above his head, Greg began hastily making excuses that he just wanted to join the student association, and Kate misunderstood him. Saying that this was the stupidest excuse to approach the girl, Kate sent the failed gentleman away. But not even a few seconds had passed before the attention of both girls was attracted by another voice, asking Jessica to add him as a friend on a social network, which surprised them a lot. It was Michael, who had already prepared his phone for exchanging contact information. Kate noted out loud that this guy was at least cute and sarcastically inquired about his intention to join the student society. But Michael said as honestly and openly as possible that he was not at all concerned about all these student associations, which prompted the question of why he needed Jessica's contacts at all. Delaying the moment of answer, the young man first said that this should be more than obvious to everyone. But without making much of a pause, he immediately added that he just wanted to date Jessica. Jessica immediately blushed at what was said and didn't know how to respond to such frankness. Moreover, all the people in the audience were shocked by Michael's directness. The result of this frankness was not long in coming and was extremely unexpected for everyone, where the unapproachable Jessica suddenly took out her phone and said that she wouldn't mind trying. Veronica looked angrily at everything that was happening, where Inga, standing next to her, added fuel to the fire, asking the girl whether Michael should be her personal dog and run after her all the time. Meanwhile, Michael, enjoying the victory, concluded that simply that in communication it was not so bad and had just borne fruit. And suddenly there was an announcement that a new target had been added in the person of Jessica, whose location was currently equal to 0. At the end of the lecture, Michael and his comrades and neighbors left the educational building, where the young people accompanying him expressed words of congratulations regarding the establishment of relations with Jessica. They asked him, after closer communication with her, to introduce them to her friends, to which Michael replied that it was too early to think and talk about it. A rather rude call made the young man turn away from the conversation and turn around. It was Greg and his henchman who expressed his misunderstanding and dissatisfaction with how Michael managed to get the contact of the first beauty of the university, to which the young man simply replied that Greg should not embarrass himself now more than what had already happened in the audience. This statement infuriated Michael's opponent, but his impulse towards physical violence was restrained by his comrades, recalling the words of the police after the last arrest that next time they would face prison. Michael was about to continue on his way when his attention was attracted by the familiar voice of Angelica, who said that she had been waiting to meet him for a very long time. This statement by the first beauty of the Faculty of Arts shocked everyone on the street. And Michael, without being at a loss, said that in order to compensate for the girl's wait, he would treat her to dinner. But the girl refused dinner and asked if the young man liked the way she looked with the things he bought her, to which Michael noticed that she looked simply amazing, especially with that handbag. Veronica listened to all this, huddled among the crowd of students, feeling feelings of jealousy and annoyance raging inside her. Meanwhile, Angelica took Michael's arm, and together they walked away from the walls of the university, continuing their dialogue and leaving behind the shocked crowd. And Greg, also watching what was happening, literally with tears in his eyes, wondered what was wrong with him.
Veronica couldn't stop her tears either, asking herself many questions, including why Angelica was better than her and why Michael made such a choice.
The time was approaching evening, and the sun gradually began to sink lower and lower. Angelica suddenly stopped her movement and turning to face Michael, showed him her recent work. It was a portrait of Michael, where the girl explained that she had stayed up late to finish it. She insisted that the young man take the gift, where she stated that she would not forgive him if he threw away the portrait. The young man was shocked by this attitude, because this was the first gift from a girl in his entire life. Satisfied with the reaction, Angelica smiled sweetly and asked if the young man liked the portrait. For a while, Michael just silently looked at the portrait, not showing any emotion. But gradually, some thoughts began to form in his head. He remembered the girl's previous attention to him regarding his clothes and his appearance, the air kiss, and now this gift, and decided that these were just tricks on her part so that he would fall into her network. The young man concluded that Angelica specially developed such a plan immediately after he spent several thousand on her. Smiling evilly, Michael concluded that he was no longer the same as before and would not fall for all these tricks. The girl, observing the changes in the facial expressions of the young man, mentally noted that he did not look joyful. Finally, Michael, portraying the most indifferent expression on his face, asked why he needed this picture. This reaction of the young man greatly confused the girl, who simply did not know how to respond to this. And Michael suddenly shortened the distance and asked how the girl intended to pay for all the gifts he had given. And at the same moment, with a deft movement, he snatched the piece of paper with the portrait from Angelica's hands. With his other hand, he stopped the movement of the girl's hand which tried to take away the sheet of paper. Indecently shortening the distance again, he said that he liked the girl herself more than her gift, which made her cheeks turn pink. Angelica felt how she literally dissolved in the most pleasant feelings when this young man was nearby when he touched her. And at that moment, the voiceover announced to Michael that +5 points had been added to the girl's disposition. Pleased with himself, Michael was preparing to continue his onslaught, which was already bringing the girl into ecstasy. But suddenly their almost complete embrace was broken by a guy who rushed between them. He, turning to Angelica, reproached her for refusing to go for a walk with him under the pretext of going for a manicure with a friend, while she was hugging some stranger. Unable to restrain himself, this young man expressed one claim after another. Pointing at Michael, he stated that she only lets this guy hug her because he has money. And Michael was very familiar with this behavior of the young man, and he immediately realized that this young man was a fan of Angelica. Meanwhile, the girl, enraged by the guy's behavior, began to shout angrily that he was no one to her at all, and he shouldn't care about who she hugs or what she does. But the escalation of the conflict was interrupted by the intervention of Michael, who introduced himself to the guy, asked his name, and inquired about how long he had been trying to court Angelica. The young man replied that his name was Tommy. He was also studying at the Faculty of Arts, and had been trying to attract the girl's attention for more than 6 months. This immediately reminded Michael of himself, where he had been chasing the same girl for 3 whole years. He told this story to his new acquaintance, telling how he had to work 4 jobs and eat whatever he could in order to satisfy the selfish needs of his passion. And finishing his sad story, he added that in the end, this girl still chose to get into someone else's Mercedes. Tommy was clearly shocked by such a story, which left him without any hope of the attention of a girl like Angelica. And Michael reinforced what was said with good friendly advice, saying that those who do this to them only motivate them to become better. After which he urged him to return to the hostel and forget about Angelique, who herself would come running to him sooner or later, having seen his successes in life. The girl did not understand at all what was happening now, watching the action in surprise. She approached Michael saying that Tommy was just an acquaintance of hers, and she had never even considered him as a romantic partner. To which the young man replied that he did not care at all about what the girl might have had with this guy in the past. And then Michael, saying that the girl did not respect either herself or him, began to tear the portrait right in front of her face, causing great amazement in the girl. Having torn a sheet of paper into small pieces and throwing them into the air, Michael turned around and walked away from the girl, saying that until she understood her surroundings and learned to communicate, it was better for them not to meet. He thought to himself that he was very interested in how the girl would react to such an attitude on his part and what she would do. And the girl's thoughts were filled with memories of how Michael treated her at their first meeting. After all, no one had ever been so kind and condescending to her. With tears in her eyes, the girl concluded that Michael really liked her, and now she ruined everything. And it was announced to the departing Michael that plus 5 points had been added to Angelica's disposition. Studying statistics along the way, the young man concluded that the worse you treat a girl, the more she begins to like her. He decided that he was done with Angelica for now and needed to start winning over Jessica. And suddenly he discovered that Jessica also broadcasts online, specializing in music and dance. Michael found this activity very cute and suggested that this girl could only pretend to be cold and unapproachable. But in fact, she was quite sweet and open. But before he could appear online, Miranda immediately began writing him messages that she was very glad to see him, but was in no hurry to agree to the offer to meet. From which Michael, of course, concluded that the girl was simply trying to scam him out of money, promising to dance for him online today. Suddenly, he received a notification that the user he was following would now take part in a competition with another user. Michael became very interested in who the inaccessible first beauty of the university Jessica would compete with. The rival turned out to be Miranda, who concluded that she accidentally called a new girl, which means victory is in her pocket. The young man found this particular set of circumstances quite interesting. Where the experienced and also not deprived of beauty, Miranda competes with the novice blogger and the first beauty Jessica. Miranda, absolutely confident in her victory, stated that her rival should not even try to compete with her, since behind her was the support of such an influential person as a lone wolf. From her experience of catching rich people, Miranda came to the conclusion that she should no longer have the wolf on her hook. And then the program issued a notification that the lone wolf user had made a transfer. But imagine her rage when she saw that the translation was not addressed to her at all. $5 million were sent and transferred to the account of Miranda's opponent Jessica, which shocked Jessica herself. Annoyed by this turn of events, Miranda bit her lips wondering why the wolf chose the new girl. The director did not hesitate to appear, demanding that the boss give an explanation as to why the money was going to others. Collecting her thoughts, Miranda said goodbye to the audience, saying that she had urgent matters and needed to run. And Michael, looking at the icon informing about the user's vacation, voiced to himself that Miranda shouldn't have played with him, because he can support anyone. He then switched to Jessica's channel. Mentally, he told her that he had spent a lot of money on her, and the girl should not disappoint him. Meanwhile, in the office of an already well-known company that provides a platform for online broadcasts, its manager was again reported about a huge translation, where the project manager said that this unknown lone wolf showed up again and broke the previous record 5 times. Having learned this information, the boss flew into a wild rage, declaring that this guy was probably some kind of oil tycoon. And the rest of the envious women who conduct their online broadcasts noted Michael's translation, concluding that today the lone wolf is in a musical mood. And then, clearly not having any depth of thought, they all began to call their assistants one by one to carry their musical instruments. And the time was already approaching late evening, where the sun had already disappeared behind the horizon. And the darkness of the night gradually began to descend on the city. Jessica sat at her musical instrument, shocked by the events that had happened. And Kate couldn't get enough of the fact that it was all online, and now they could become popular. But the heroine of today was not very happy with the prospect of becoming popular and making various men happy with her appearance. She said that the most important thing for a woman is a career and independence, both financially and in all other aspects of life. Frustrated by her friend's attitude to the issue of popularity, Kate told her not to teach her about life. And immediately after these words, she secretly asked if Jessica knew the rich man who sent the money today. To which the girl angrily replied that she did not know him and should not know him. But immediately after that, with obvious interest in the person of this rich man, she said that he really sent a lot of money, for which she needed to write him a few words of gratitude. And Kate, while collecting equipment, thought with disappointment that her friend had said one thing, but was doing exactly the opposite. Suddenly, a wild scream from her friend made the girl literally jump on the spot and drop all the equipment. Unable to swear, she turned around and saw that nothing critical had happened, and could only quietly ask the question of what had happened. To which Jessica responded in confusion that she apparently knew who the lone wolf really was, where she came to the conclusion that it was Michael. Immediately, the girl remembered the story of one boy who was the son of a very rich and successful man. But at the same time, he was modest and did not want to show his wealth and high position. He received the best education, but realized that he did not want to be the object of everyone's attention and wanted to live freely. One day he met a beautiful girl, fell in love with her and decided to win her favor, but as an ordinary poor person. But the girl's friend listened to this story without enthusiasm, and only said that she had reread romance novels. The girl began to worry very much about this poor boy, who since childhood was surrounded by the best. And now it is probably very difficult for him to pretend to be a simple person. Michael, meanwhile, managed to take a shower in his dorm. Having almost finished drying himself, the young man noticed that a message had arrived on his phone. Taking the phone, Michael, not without surprise, noted that Jessica invited him to have dinner together without even asking where he got so much money from, and decided to check on her. The second half of the next, as usual, sunny day was already in full swing. Michael was on his way to a date with Jessica, where he chose a moped as his means of transport. He stopped near the women's hostel, where a certain man had already parked his luxury car. This man was the first to start the conversation, saying that he was waiting for his girlfriend and asking Michael who he was waiting for. At that moment, the young man saw Jessica appear on the street, looking around, apparently in search of Michael. And then the young man, pointing at her, answered the man that this was the same girl he was waiting for here. This statement greatly amused the man, where he said that with such a beauty, he himself had a better chance than a guy who did not even have the means to buy a good car. Meanwhile, Jessica saw a young man waiting for her. She continued to believe in her fantasy, where Michael seemed to her to be a secret rich man who was hiding from everyone. Intoxicated by her fantasies, the girl quickly headed towards him. Meanwhile, the man was busy telling Michael about how he had to work hard and then maybe in 15, 20 years such a girl would get into his car. While this narrative of success continued, Jessica had already managed to approach Michael and took a place on the moped behind him. The man didn't even have time to understand anything when a moped rushed past him, on which a guy and a gorgeous girl rushed towards new impressions from each other. The man silently looked after the vehicle, speeding off into the distance. And then emotions took over, where he, falling to his knees, lamented the fact that his whole life aimed at obtaining large incomes turned out to be meaningless, which this situation with a beauty who sat on some kind of moped had just shown him. Jessica didn't see herself on a simple moped. She saw an expensive bike and a prince in a white suit at its wheel. Her fantasies were dispelled by Michael's voice that they had arrived and the sight of the establishment where he had brought them. It was one of the cheapest fast food places in the city, which people of Jessica's level didn't really notice. And the main dish in this establishment was spicy crayfish and shrimp. Before sitting down at the table, Michael placed a napkin in front of the girl, which again evoked in her the most positive emotions based on her fantasies, where she thought that even in the guise of a simple guy, he did not forget the manners instilled in him from childhood. She also gratefully accepted from him a package of disposable gloves, in which it is customary to eat crayfish and shrimp so as not to get your hands dirty. And so a minute later, Michael was happily eating the shrimp. And the girl, continuing to live in her fantasies, noted that these are probably the smallest shrimps that he is forced to eat for her sake, so that she does not feel awkward in an expensive restaurant. And at that moment, when Jessica once again imagined the prince in the person of Michael, the latter was told that plus 10 points had been added to the girl's disposition. Michael was quite surprised that the location rating had suddenly been added. And Jessica had already taken one shrimp and began to peel it, after which the girl held out the peeled shrimp to Michael's mouth and asked him to open his mouth. Giving him her almost loving look, the girl asked the young man to let her feed him. Michael was completely bewildered by what was happening. But he did not resist and accepted kindness and tenderness from the girl just at the moment when Veronica entered the cafe, accompanied by Mason. Before she could take a step, Veronica noticed Michael and Jessica sitting at the table. She couldn't believe that she had witnessed the unapproachable Jessica feeding Michael from her hands. At the same time, the girl began to think about what was happening with Michael, who just yesterday was leaving accompanied by Angelica. And today, he is already in the company of another girl. Not wanting to be in front of her ex, she asked Mason to choose another cafe, saying that there were too many people there. But her companion did not heed the girl's requests, making the correct assumption that she simply did not want to meet her friends. Having said that he would figure everything out now, Mason, literally placing his hand on Veronica, walked with her to the table where Michael was. Michael, who had just taken the shrimp from Jessica's hand, noticed a shadow looming over him from behind. Then he heard his name and saw bills falling in front of his face, after which Mason said that Michael should take these $500 and get out of this cafe. The young man looked at the bills that had fallen both on the table and into the plates of food. And the only thing that came to his mind was that Mason's behavior was extremely ridiculous and did not do him any credit. Throwing another stack of not very large bills, Mason said that now it should definitely be enough for Michael to get away from here. And Jessica suddenly squeezed her purse so hard that her finger bones even cracked. This did not go unnoticed by Michael, who could not understand why the girl was so angry. And the reason for Jessica's anger was Mason, who was now ruining her perfect date, and to whom she sent all imaginable and inconceivable curses. But Mason did not let up, saying that if it was not enough, he could add more, accompanying the words with the movement of his fingers, taking out another stack of banknotes from his wallet and throwing them into the air. Suddenly, someone's hand suddenly fell on the bills lying on the table. The waiter arrived in time and offered Mason to give all this money to him in exchange for organizing another table for him. Roughly grabbing the waiter by the clothes, the man began to say that he did not want any other table other than this one. But his speech was interrupted by a sweeping blow from a woman's handbag right in the face, which did not go in vain on a couple of his teeth. At Michael's surprised look, Jessica hastened to say that this was not her doing. And behind them, a huge silhouette appeared, which called Mason a scumbag, living on her money, driving his car, and as it turns out, also sleeping with other girls using her money. Michael was literally shaken by the sight of this scary huge woman behind him. And Mason, holding the bruised place, asked his wife Goldie what she was doing here, to which the terrible woman, terribly distorting her face and accompanying her speech with choice abuse, replied that if she had not been here, she would never have known that he was sleeping with others. And Mason suddenly began to say that Goldie was all he had, that she was the only one, that he owed her everything and didn't even think about other girls, which having already understood the essence of what was happening, Veronica looked at with reproach. Suddenly Mason grabbed Veronica by the hair and began accusing her that it was her fault, that she was the one who tried to seduce him, to which the girl tried to justify herself by saying that the man himself began to court her and said that he did not have a partner. With a furious demand to shut up, Mason gave the girl a strong slap in the face. Not at all expecting such a turn of events, Veronica fell to the floor and looked in fear at the angry man. But Mason did not let up. Having entered into the role of the victim on whom the feminine charms had been tested, he had already raised his hand for a new blow. However, someone's hand stopped his movement. It was Michael who said that a man only disgraces himself by beating a woman in front of the entire cafe. So continuing to sit on the floor and clutching her cheek that was burning from the blow, Veronica suddenly realized that Michael still loved her. Meanwhile, Michael was told that Veronica's favor had increased by 60 points and that her favor had reached the maximum possible level. After which the voiceover said that Veronica is a fan of the master. The amount of Michael's personal financial benefit from spending on the girl is $5,000 and 20 game points were also awarded. Without hesitation, the young man gave the order to use 10 points to improve his physical characteristics. And at the same moment, with a deft movement of his hand, he performed a trick on Mason by bending his arm behind his back, which made the latter howl, after which he pushed him away from himself. But the restless man was not going to admit defeat, grabbing the bottle that stood on one of the tables. Screaming and swearing, he swung it over the young man's head. But for Michael, who had improved his physical characteristics, Mason moved too slowly. With one short lunge forward, the young man literally swept the enemy out of his way. Michael said to Mason, kneeling in front of him, that there is no shame in being supported by a woman, but there is a shame in raising a hand against a woman. But these words flew past the ears of the disgraced man, who did not want to put up with the loss and began to take a knife out of his pocket. Seeing the bladed weapon, Jessica shouted to her companion to be careful. And the enraged man had already managed to straighten up and begin to perform a stabbing movement with his hand forward, tightly squeezing his weapon. But it was not difficult for the pumped-up young man to leave the line of attack, simultaneously grabbing the enemy's hand and knocking the knife out of it. Or immediately after this, without giving the enemy a second to somehow come to his senses and react, Michael used a technique that wrestlers call a throw over the back. The sound of the splat on the floor seemed to be audible even on the street. And so Mason lay unconscious on the floor, defeated by the brave young man who defended the girl's honor. The winner himself, modestly placing his hands in his trouser pockets, headed towards the exit where Jessica followed him. But suddenly his movement was interrupted by Veronica, who grabbing his leg said that she was wrong towards him and asked him to give her another chance. For a moment Michael thought about it but quickly pulled himself together and began to speak. He reminded the girl of how he dragged her several kilometers to the hospital when she got hurt. He remembered how he worked tirelessly for 6 months to give her a new phone, which she refused because it was not the latest model. He also remembered that he had always known about her frivolity and commercialism, but stubbornly believed that sooner or later she would notice him and appreciate his efforts. Concluding his speech, Michael said that Veronica had a lot of time and chances. Now the Michael who ran for her has died and the girl has made her choice. Tears of grief and despair welled up in Veronica's eyes, because every word of the young man was the truth. Which, as we know, always hits hard, where the pain from its blows is always stronger than physical pain. Once on the street, Michael apologized to his companion for everything that happened, which ruined their date. To which Jessica playfully replied that everything was great. And she had a unique chance to see the young man from the other side. Such words from the girl greatly embarrassed Michael, but at the same time they were pleasant to him. And Jessica, unable to take her eyes off the young man and replaying the events of today's date in her head, was firmly convinced that this guy could still surprise her with many things. Soon the sky over the city was covered with black thunderclouds, and the downpour did not take long to arrive. The door to the dorm room swung open very suddenly, as if it had been kicked with all its might. So Veronica returned to the room after an unsuccessful evening, where the neighbor who met her lamented the fact that the girl did not have an umbrella with her, and she was all wet. The greeter hastened to tell the news that yesterday Jessica received as much as $5 million from Michael, which infuriated the already very upset girl who asked where such information came from. To which the friend explained that Jessica's neighbor had spilled the beans about it. Digesting the new information, Veronica fell into some sort of stupor for a few seconds. And finally, she reached her psychological limit and burst into tears. Her sobs were accompanied by such loud sounds that in the neighboring rooms of the dorm, unfriendly statements were constantly heard addressed to the one who was interfering with her rest. Meanwhile, in the room where Michael lived, his neighbors were surprised that their friend was very good at playing video games, suggesting that he was a secret esports player. And Michael himself thought that after the distribution of reinforcement points, even playing games became very easy, but he said out loud that he was just lucky. While his friends were offering him business ideas like the one to broadcast their games online, Michael got ready to go to the shower. In the shower, he saw the direct effect of the enhancement classes expressed in the clearly visible relief of the muscles on his body. He also noticed that his facial features had changed, becoming more fit and courageous. Looking at his body in the mirror, the young man could only think about the fact that now he had to avoid taking shortcuts with the girls. He was distracted from admiring himself by the call of his neighbors who shouted that his phone was ringing. Michael, coming out of the shower, took the phone. It turned out that the first beauty of the Faculty of Arts, the beautiful Angelica, was calling him. In his thoughts, the young man came to the conclusion that this cunning girl had come up with something new to lure money from him and win him over, which means he needs to be on his guard. Picking up the phone, Michael asked the girl the purpose of her call. But loud sobs and screams that were heard in the speaker of the phone literally forced the young man to pull the receiver away from his ear. The apartment where Angelica lived was in another part of the city. There were new things scattered all over the room, the labels from which had not even been torn off yet. The girl herself was sitting in the middle of the room on her knees on the floor, bowing her head. Unable to stop her tears, Angelica asked Michael to lend her $500,000. She began to say that her father had always been addicted to gambling. And then one day he lost. Big bandits came to them and took everything they had, after which their previously well-off family found themselves at the very bottom. In the end, the girl added that she was not selfish at all. It's just that their family has a lot of debts that need to be repaid. Having listened to the end, Michael simply hung up without saying anything in response, which surprised the girl. But a moment later a message arrived on the girl's phone, after reading which Angelica was simply shocked, because $5 million had been deposited into her account. And Michael sent her a voice message that he just accidentally made a mistake by 10. Clutching the phone with the treasured message to her chest, Angelica swore to herself that she must definitely thank Michael. The rain outside was getting heavier.
Michael sat in his room, annoyed that despite everything, Angelica's position did not reach the foot level and amounted to 94 points.
It was necessary to come up with something, to act in a different way, and perhaps directly. He remembered the treatise The Art of War by Sun Tzu, where one of the rules was that the enemy must be forced to act when he hesitates. By morning the rain had stopped, the clouds had cleared, and a nice warm sunny day was shaping up. Michael walked from the hostel to the academic buildings, accompanied by one of his neighbors. Suddenly he heard a woman's voice calling out to him. It was Veronica, who, handing him a package, said that she had prepared lunch for him and offered to go to lectures together. But before Michael had time to say a word in response, another female voice attracted his attention from the other side. It was Angelica, who, holding out a special thermos for food, said that she had also prepared a delicious lunch for him, because she thought that he was probably already tired of eating in the student canteen. And then the eyes of the two girls met, not foreshadowing anything good for each other. And Michael stood between them, dumbfounded, and did not know what to do or what to say. At this very moment, when the situation seemed to be heating up to the limit, Michael heard another call behind him. The young man slowly turned around and his amazement knew no bounds. Behind him stood Jessica, who said that she also brought him lunch, where she chose beef noodles as the lunch dish. At the same moment, not the most friendly glances of other contenders for Michael's attention were directed towards the girl. Where to outside spectators all this seemed like a kind of fight inside the ring. And Michael, taking the bag of food from the girl's hands, asked in surprise how Jessica knew that he liked beef noodles. To which the girl timidly replied that yesterday, when they were eating shrimp, she assumed that the young man liked spicy dishes. Where everyone knows that one of the best spicy dishes is noodles with beef. Michael thought to himself that this girl had a clear advantage because of her attentiveness, and he thanked her out loud, saying that it was always nice when someone showed concern. And the prudent Jessica said that gratitude is not required. You just need to always take into account the preferences of the person for whom you are cooking. And the enraged Veronica and Angelica continued to devour the seemingly modest Jessica with their eyes. But no matter how hard they tried to make it look worse, the opponent had already dealt her signature blow, from which all her rivals scattered in different directions without any chance of success. Suddenly Jessica pulled out a small box and handed it to Michael with words of gratitude. Michael was simply shocked because it was a smartphone of the newest model. The students standing nearby all this time who witnessed this whole scene with the participation of Michael and the three most beautiful girls of the university were again shocked that the unapproachable Jessica was giving gifts to this guy. Her rivals experienced no less shock. Also wondering about the level of wealth of the girl who could afford to give such an expensive gift. It was a control blow from Jessica, which literally smashed her opponents across the floor. And the girls had no choice but to watch the departing couple. The day was just beginning where the sun was still gaining its height. Veronica was the first to break the silence after Michael left, telling herself that she just wanted him back. But didn't understand why it had become so difficult. Angelica was able to control herself much better. And she turned to a recent rival who found herself in the same situation with a question about her name and whether they could discuss something with her. To which the girl responded with a sudden outburst of anger, shouting that they had nothing to talk about. And that in general, this whole situation had developed because of Angelica. But the enterprising girl, stopping this outburst of rage, said in a soft voice that they should act together. Because this is the only way they can effectively resist Jessica, who is taking Michael away from them. Meanwhile, Michael stood not far from Jessica and admired both the gift itself and the personal qualities of the girl who made it. But then he carefully looked first at the girl and then at her level in the system. And at that same moment, the realization came to him that such a low level of disposition in no way fits with her actual actions. Where without information about her disposition, the young man could come to the conclusion that the girl fell in love with him. This means that now all this is delicious food, an expensive phone, nothing more than bait for him. Michael came to the conclusion that this girl is really smart and her methods are very sophisticated, where the predator allows the prey to think that she is the hunter. After thinking about this, the young man concluded that he needed to find some way to speed up the process of increasing Jessica's favor. Michael was distracted from his thoughts by messages from Miranda, who apologized that last time she was unable to arrange a meeting with him. But this does not mean that she does not want to meet, which greatly amused the young man, who understood all her selfish motives. But then, immediately after Miranda's message, Michael received another one, which contained a link and password to enter the coolest chat room in the city where the most famous and wealthy people communicated. Having logged into this chat, the first message the young man received was a question about the opportunity to discuss a business proposal. But Michael immediately realized that all these rich people just wanted to test him and decided to play this game with them. He wrote that he was ready to discuss any proposals from his new comrades, to which he immediately received a photograph indicating the location of a rich villa and with an offer to purchase this luxury property. The offer was unexpected and real estate in that area was indeed worth tens of millions. But Michael wrote that he could ask the price for this house the other day, after which he returned to Jessica's company. Meanwhile, in that very country villa, the following events took place. Quite unexpectedly, having received consent to look at the property, a certain man told his companion that apparently, this lone wolf was not a deceiver and he really had money. To which his interlocutor said that this would become clear in the next 2 days. But there is no need to worry in any case, because no matter how you look at it, their team will win and will either get a new wealthy partner or expose the fraudster. A few minutes later, a message was received on the young man's phone with the address where the pitchfork was located. And then the question arose in his head how much Jessica's position could improve if he gave her such a villa. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 2 in the comments section. Also subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.